Sorry, guys. Give me a second.
I already went through that too.
There we go. Now we're on. Now we're all set.
Let's call the meeting of the Finance Committee to order on April 17th, 2019. Would the clerk please call the roll?
Alderman O'Brien.
Present.
Alderman Kelly is here. Alderman Laws.
Here.
Alderman Clee.
Here.
Alderman Karen. Here. Alderman Harry Gathright.
Present.
And chaired Mayor Dunges.
I'm here.
The entire committee is here.
The next item is public comment. Is there any member of the public who would like to speak to the committee? There is no one coming forward. The next item is the presentation by Melanson Heath and Company on the annual audit. And CFO Griffin is here as well.
Do they need the screen?
This is Scott McIntyre of Melanson Heath, and as he usually does, he will brief us on the annual audit.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor and members of the committee. Thank you very much for the invitation to come in tonight. As the mayor said, my name is Scott McIntyre. I'm one of the partners at Melanson Heath and Company, and I'm here to give you a quick walkthrough of our audit process and tell you a little bit about the process and the results of our work, as well as walk you through some of the highlights in your comprehensive annual financial report. It's our understanding that, at least in your packages, you were provided the comprehensive annual financial report. It's in excess of 200 pages. Only going to hit on some high points in there. Accompanied with that was what we in the audit world call a governance letter. I'm going to talk about that probably as much as I am about the numbers, and that's what I'm going to start with. In essence, what that governance letter tells you is it tells you about the results of our audit of your financial statements. I like to, the language in that letter is fairly standard. I like to, speak about it a little more basically. And the results of our audit are, for your year ended June 30, 2018, were that we found your books and records to be in good working order. What that means even more specifically is when we came in to do our test work, we found key accounts such as your cash accounts, receivable accounts, long-term debt accounts. All key accounts were reconciled on a regular and timely basis as a result of the test work that we performed last fall. And as a result of that, when it came to assisting in compiling your comprehensive annual financial report, our firm did not need to propose any significant audit entries. Basically, what that means is your books and records were in good working order, and they are prepared in accordance with generally accepted accounting principles. What that means is it takes you to our opinion, which is in your comprehensive annual financial report, and it says that it goes on for nearly 3 pages. But to really summarize it very succinctly, it means that in our opinion, your financial statements are totally in accordance with generally accepted accounting principles for local governments here in the United States. That's a real quick summary of the governance letter. It's a little bit more in detail that tells you about some key estimates that are incorporated into your financial statements. But in essence, auditing standards require us to tell you if we found any significant audit entries that needed to be posted, if there were any disagreements in how to apply accounting principles into your accounting statements, into your financial statements, and if there were any key estimates in there. In the first two, again, just to summarize, we did not need to propose any significant audit entries. There were no disagreements in how to apply generally accepted accounting principles, and there are a few estimates in there. Most of your estimates, though, are actuarially determined, so there's a standards and science behind the consultants that you employ to help you estimate two account balances that we'll talk very briefly about in your CAFR, which is your net pension liability and your net OPEB liability. With that said, if I could turn your attention into the comprehensive annual financial report, when I mentioned it just a moment ago, our auditor's opinion, if you have the document, it starts on page 15. goes 15 through 17. This is everything else in this document belongs to the city of Nashua. And again, just to summarize our opinion, your financial statements are totally in accordance with generally accepted accounting principles. Following that is your management's discussion and analysis. It's a great resource to go back to at a later point in time to understand why key account balances may have changed. If you have the document, or if you choose to at least make a note, the one thing in MD&A that I would want to point out is on page 26. In the middle part of page 26, it's headed up as the general fund. I'm not going to read about it. You might want to reference that, because when we get to your general fund balance sheet, many of the things that I'll talk about on that general fund balance sheet are summarized very nicely here on page 26, that middle paragraph on page 26. With that being said, if I could turn your attention over to page 31. Just a couple of minutes of discussion on page 31. This is what we would refer to as your long-term perspective balance sheet. In just a moment, we'll turn a few pages and look at your general fund balance sheet, which is really, where most readers will turn to look at the fund balance on the different components of fund balance. But many years ago, the accounting standard setters put into play a dual perspective financial model here. And so you have both your general fund basis and you have page 31, which is more of a long-term basis balance sheet. Very quickly, the key numbers on this page, in that first column of numbers, about 2/3 of the way down the page, you have your net pension liability and your net OPEB liability. First, on the net pension liability, there's two components of it. You are a participant in the New Hampshire retirement system, and you also have locally the Board of Public Works system. With respect to the New Hampshire, your proportional share of the New Hampshire retirement system liability, you see that number about $244 million and that's measured as of June 30, 2017. That's actually down from the year before by about $25 million, mostly due to improved investment results through the point in time of June 30, 2017. The other liability that I mentioned is just above that number. It's called your net and total OPEB liability, and that has an account balance of about $67 million. There's something new in that number this year. A year ago, that number was $27 million, but the accounting standards changed. I'll certainly try to answer any questions that the committee may have on the changes, but it's not as if the liability from one year jumped from 27 million to 67. That major jump, I think I recall speaking about it with you a year ago, was because a new accounting standard was put into play for fiscal year 18. And maybe just quickly to summarize that OPEB, or OPEB, it's an acronym for Other Post-Employment Benefits, and the other means benefits other than pension. And by and large, what that means is the retiree health care benefit that retirees have earned. So that's a real quick summary of those two long-term liabilities. It's just to put them in perspective, they certainly are large and significant. Rating agencies know about them. The accounting standard changes that have been put into play over the last couple of years have, in essence, taken them from being, my words, buried on page 150, where not that many readers would get to page 150. The accounting standards changed to put them on the face of this balance sheet, but financial institutions and rating agencies have always known for Nashua and other communities in the state and throughout the country that those liabilities have existed. There's also, with respect to the pension liabilities, they are on a funding schedule. I think it goes out about 18 years, and that liability is scheduled actuarially to be fully funded over that time frame. So hopefully that provides just a little bit of perspective on those two significant numbers. But again, I think in today's what we have found in much of our governmental work is that at least a quick discussion about those two liabilities when you walk through a document of this size and magnitude is important. If I could now ask you to turn your attention over to page 34. This is a much more of a traditional looking balance sheet, various funds, and the focus from almost all readers is going to be on page 34. It's that first column of numbers, or your general fund, which is, of course, your main operating fund. And the focus for readers is in that lower third section of that first column of numbers. They're titled up at your fund balances. You have non-spendable, restricted, committed, assigned, and unassigned. And collectively, those add up to the total fund balance in your general fund of about $54.8 million. That $54.8 million is increased by about $4 million over the prior year. Essentially, what that means is the inflows of current dollars exceeded the outflows of current dollars by about $4 million. We'll see why, the reasons why, in just a minute when we look at your budget versus actual comparative statement. But it's important to look not only at total fund balance, but the various components. For most readers, the key number is that that third number up from the bottom, where your unassigned fund balance, with a June 30, 2018 balance of $29 million, or a little bit more than $29 million, or $29.1 million. That number is about $800,000 greater than it was the prior year, and it represents a little bit more than 10% of your general fund expenditures. And those are key indicators. Financial institutions and rating agencies like to see a little increase in that unassigned fund balance each year, and they like to look at it as a percentage of the community's general fund expenditures, and having a balance in that account of a little bit more than 10% is generally viewed as very strong or very favorable. When I mentioned earlier that there was a page in your MD&A, it was page 26. A lot of what I just spoke about with respect to your unassigned fund balance, the change in it, and the percentage is summarized in that paragraph on page 26 of your CAFR. So I wanted to draw that to your attention because it's a good resource to go back to at a later point in time, to just as a refresher as to why some of these account balances, or what they represent, and how they have changed. You certainly have some other components of fund balance. The assigned fund balance, much of that is some year-end encumbrances, as well as fund balance that is being applied towards the next fiscal year's budget, the next fiscal year's tax rate, and that's the assigned fund balance. And the committed fund balance, much of that is the SERF, or the Capital Equipment Reserve Funds, is much of that, not all, but is in that $13 million. That component of fund balance, that committed fund balance of a little bit more than $13 million, that's up about $4 million over the prior year. There were a lot of dollars that were put into the Capital Equipment Reserve Funds at year end. So, just to summarize, total fund balance of $54 million. It's up about $4 million. The unassigned fund balance, again, the first place that most readers will turn, is up about $800,000 and represents a little bit more than 11% of expenditures, which again is going to be considered very favorably, or considered strong by rating agencies. Now, I mentioned that there was both an increase in total fund balance, the unassigned fund balance, and the committed. To look at the types of activities that occurred in your fiscal year 18 that would have generated those surpluses to add to those accounts, if I could turn your attention over to page 38 just for a moment. And the focus is this. Page 38 is your budget and actual comparative schedule. The first two columns are your budget, as the headings indicate, the original budget and the final budget. Then you have your actual amounts on a budgetary basis. And then the final column is your variances. Now, most of the, and if you look first in the lower right-hand corner, you see a number of $6.6 million. In total, I would look at that as the favorable budgetary results of operation for fiscal year 2018. And almost all of that is coming on the revenue side of the equation, and even further, most of the $6.6 million in favorable revenue results of operations is as a direct result of the auto permits that came in almost 4.6, or a little bit more than $4.6 million better than what was expected. That number is, that favorable number on the auto permits is consistent with prior years. It's consistent with a lot of communities we look at the state. So there's the results of operation here are fairly consistent with many, not all, but certainly many other communities. That's a very, very quick walkthrough of, the governance letter, our audit process, some of the things that audit standards require us to communicate to you. Again, I wanted to touch base very quickly on the long-term liabilities, the net pension liability, and then OPEB liability, then really focus on the general fund, because most readers still do focus there. There's a wealth of other information in this document on some of the other funds. Note disclosures, there's a wealth of note disclosures on the aforementioned pension and OPEB liabilities. On your long-term debt, there's some amortization schedules in there that shows how rapidly you pay out those long-term liabilities, which you do pay them out fairly rapidly. Your governmental debt is a lot of times financial institutions and rating agencies will look at how much of your overall debt load, the outstanding bonds payable, that is, what percentage of that gets paid off within the next 10 years. And Nashua has what is considered for your governmental debt a very rapid payout of that debt. So again, note disclosures on all of those key accounts, as well as some trend information in the back of the report, and combining schedules. So with that, I will open it up to see if there are questions on the comprehensive annual financial report or on the procedures we performed.
And does Mr. Griffin have anything to add, or?
I would just, thank you, Mayor. I would just like to thank the members of the financial staff that prepare this document. I think it's our 13th year that we've won the GFOA award for reporting excellence, in large measure due to the financial staff, but also our colleagues in all the divisions, the division directors and the financial managers in those areas. So it's a comprehensive financial report that's done, that's really a testament to the city's financial position. And as you've seen over the years, we talked a little bit about the budget, the financial services budget. Alderman Clemmons was discussing the debt service, the payouts that Mr. McIntyre said. We do pay off debt rapidly, which is a sign of strength. And we have 2 AAA ratings because of the efforts of both the presentations, but also the communications that we have on ratings calls with Standard & Poor's and Fitch. So definitely a comprehensive effort. We're in good position here. And Mr. McIntyre did focus on the OPEB, which is basically benefits, as well as the pension liability. It is a very daunting number, but on the operating side, we were glad to see for the fiscal 20 budget that the pension amount, the rates that were charged didn't go up as dramatically as they did in the most recent past. So thank you for allowing me to make comments, Mr. Mayor and the members of the committee. Thank you.
So questions or comments from Mr. McIntyre or Mr. Griffin? Alderman O'Brien.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And looking down legislative row here with some of my colleagues who serve up at the House, some good things are coming up from the state. I guess we were fast-tracked on that state pension plan and had to pay the $2 million annually. But now I understand there's a bill, and if it gets through, and well, let me just say, with that increase of the $2 million, you can call it what you want, but the state used to pay 35% and then cut it down to basically nothing. You could call it a state cutback. I like to call it a tax, an inadvertent tax, but it was that. And if the governor leaves his fingers off of it, there is a bill pending that is going to contribute at least 15% to get the state. Now, that could even boost us even better. The second thing is the fast tracking. I think, Mr. Griffin, aren't we at the zenith of that? Now it's going to start rolling back a little less if that bill didn't come with the 15%. It's going to start dropping now in an you know, the implementation will start dropping a little bit then from the 2 million.
I could probably address kind of the impacts to the city itself, and I'll do that first, and maybe turn it over to Mr. McIntyre. But the rates, the employer rates were held constant this year for the most part. There was a little increase in the teacher amounts, but there's a 5-year, it's complicated, but there's a 5-year average of returns, and the year that was dropped was a bad year. And the most recent year, as Mr. McIntyre indicated, was a good year. So the rates are stabilizing.
Right.
It's the liability that's still a large liability, and that is trying to get funded within a 30-year window. But the impact to the city of a 15% state contribution to teachers, police, and fire is about $3 million that when the mayor had his meeting with you folks that are in the legislature, it's a big number. It's a $3 million number, which coincidentally kind of matches the increase in the health costs. So it's a very important number for the city, but maybe Mr. McIntyre, who follows the larger level and then gets the apportionment, he could speak to that. And the two definitely go together.
Well, I was going to turn back to the actual page that the liabilities on. It probably isn't necessary. And certainly any contribution that would come from an external party, external to the city of Nashua, would almost immediately begin to bring that liability down. And over time, I think it would even escalate the rapidness of that liability could come down.
Alderwoman Clee.
Relative to the government debt and the rapid payout, when you say rapid payout, you meaning that we're paying it off earlier than expected? So if we had a 15-year, we might be paying it off in 11 or 12 years. Is that?
Great question. That's not what I mean.
Okay.
What I mean by that is that as an example, you issue bonds, and some of those bonds have a 10-year life, a 20-year life, and it's going to vary. But in total, if you had, $50 million in debt, just to use some round numbers, then credit rating agencies and financial institutions, they're going to want to see you paying off about 75% of that within a 10-year period. So when I talk about how rapid you're paying it out is, are you paying out 75% of your bonds, not early, but is the schedule that they are termed out to be, will you pay off 75% of your outstanding bonds at your balance sheet date within a 10-year period? That's what I mean by, a rapid payout schedule. You're not paying them early.
So we're exceeding the 75% that would be required, or are we just up to that, at least the 75%?
The 75% was a number for conversational
Okay,
purposes
okay,
that I put out there to try to illustrate that it wasn't so much paying it early, it's
Our percentage of
75%
payment.
is a rapid payout.
Okay.
You're in that ballpark.
Okay.
I don't want to sit here and tell you
Oh, no,
you're
that-
at 75%. I wanted to hopefully simplify it a little bit. That's really the measure that rating agencies like to see, is how rapid are you paying it out? Really not so much are you paying it early.
Okay, thank you very much.
In fact, we don't necessarily have the option of paying early,
Yeah.
in the sense that
Right.
to pay early, you got to so-called call the bonds, meaning you pay people before they're anticipating being paid, and most of our bonds don't authorize that,
Yeah.
Okay.
which is attractive really to the bondholder, actually, because they don't want to be bought out early usually. They don't want to be bought out early because they know
They
they'll
want
only
the
get bought out
interest.
early if they're in an advantageous position.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions or comments? All right, well, thank you very much
Thank you.
for your report and for your, how many years have you done the audit? I forget.
It's been a handful. I don't know off the top of my head.
I
Thank
was
you.
looking back at it, and you were there 2010, so it's been a few.
It's been a while, so I was just
Yeah.
curious.
Thanks.
All right, well, thank you very much for your help. So now we go to communications. Alderwoman Kelly.
Communication from John L. Griffin, CFO, regarding I'm tired.
Melanson.
I'm tired. Melanson health presentation, April 17th, 2019.
And is there a motion to accept that and place it on file?
Yeah,
Okay.
so moved.
Discussion?
I'll get here.
All those in favor of the motion say aye. Opposed? Motion passes. Alderwoman Kelly.
Communication from Dan Kuchen, Purchasing Manager, regarding contract for NPD window project. Mr. Mayor, I move to accept, place on file, and contingent upon final passage of R19127, award the contract to DL King and Associates in the amount of $134,500. Source of funding is Department 150, bond funds.
And Ms. Smith and another is here for the police department, so why don't you come on forward? How many people have visited the PD to see the condition of these windows? Is anybody on the committee? Some members of the board came over, right?
We
What?
saw the
We saw
video.
pictures.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah, you saw
There
the
was
days
pictures.
ago.
a video presentation and it
Okay.
showed how the snow was getting in, so
And the air
they
and the
proved,
bugs.
they proved a point, yeah.
And
Yes.
that they wear their winter coats to do their
Yeah,
work,
yeah.
yes.
Yeah.
Well, I think President Wilshire and someone else came over, didn't they? I forget, didn't someone actually visit? But maybe not, I don't know.
I think
Anyway, I
Alderman
went over
Dowd,
there.
Alderman
What?
Dowd was there, and
Yeah, yeah.
There was several people that came.
Yeah, anyway, the condition of the windows is ridiculous. We're losing all kinds of energy, snow's coming in. How this building that's only, I don't know, 40 years old with some, and renovated, it could have gotten to this. What? 39 years? All right, anyway, do you have anything to add to the situation? Do you have anything that you'd like to?
I don't have anything to add, aside from what a majority of people have seen already. If there's any questions, I'd be happy to answer them.
All right. The motion is for the award of the contract contingent on approval of the funding later on. Is there any discussion or questions for the PD? Alderwoman Kelly.
Thank you. You guys did a pretty good job of walking us through the need here and everything. I'm just wondering how soon we can get those windows in so it's not snowing this winter.
I mean, as soon as we can get the work done, the end date, I have the end date that that DL King gave us. They actually updated the contract, and I can give you that date as soon as I can find it.
Indicates a 10 to 12-week lead time from the time you give them the
For the
go.
product itself, correct. And then they gave us a final date of, so 25 weeks after the notice to proceed will be the completion date. That
Okay.
includes the lead time for the product and all of the labor.
Great. Thank you.
Anyone else?
Well, yeah, I was just gonna say in general, and I'm glad we're addressing this, and coming from the other side of the fence on fire that has multiple buildings, and I did say it the last time, spending a night in Lake Street Station, the old one, where now current fire alarm was, and, you know, I went home that morning and asked the wife, can I have every spare blanket in the house, you know what I mean? The heater came on in September and didn't go off until May, you know what I mean? And it's a shame when we have, you know, municipal buildings and expect people to be productive and work. And I'm hoping that as this board, and I think maybe as we go along in the future, that we look at our infrastructure, police, fire stations, and sewers, and we're very well with another project speaking with the sewage treatment plant. And, you know, if we start losing our infrastructure, you know, what money did we save? We didn't save anything. So I'm glad we're addressing this for you guys. Very good.
All right. If there are no other questions, all those in favor of the motion say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes. and thank you very much.
Thank you, Mayor.
Alderwoman Kelly.
Communication from Dan Kukin, Purchasing Manager, regarding contract for independent consultant services. Mr. Mayor, I move to accept, place on file, and award the contract to Meenan Gaiwali in the amount of $22,000. Funds are available in Department 183, Economic Development TIF District.
And I believe Mr. Cummings is here on this. Why don't you come on up? To clarify where this, what the source of this, the funds for this contract would be, the Board of Aldermen, the city created a TIF, or tax increment financing district, surrounding the river a little over a year ago. And what that means is a certain proportion of the taxes generated from the buildings around the river, including Lofts 34, Clock Tower, Cotton Mill Square, and a few others, a certain portion of that tax, of the money generated by those properties, is directed into the TIF, the Tax Increment Financing District. And that money is then dedicated to be spent along the river and to implement the Riverfront Master Plan that the Board of Aldermen adopted several years ago. There's about $800,000, or between $700,000 and $800,000 in the account right now. So this $22,000 would come from that account, the TIF account. There is a TIF board of director, or advisory board of property owners and residents around the river that advises the city as to how the money might be spent. I assume they've endorsed this idea. And just as background, with that, could you, Mr. Cummings, explain what's proposed here?
Absolutely, Mr. Mayor. Again, for the record, Tim Cummings, Director of Economic Development. So what's before you this evening is just a temporary contract up to 6 months, though I think it's going to be less than that, where we're going to be engaging an independent consultant. Alderwoman Kelly did a great job in saying the name. That is actually a very difficult name. The first time I tried saying it, it was very challenging. Her name is Meena Gawali, and her resume is included in your packet. You'll see she is very experienced and has some wonderful skills. And we're bringing her in to help us move the TIF initiative forward, and particularly help to bring forward some of the projects that I know this body and other groups in the city have been asking about. So I'm asking for you to approve this. The reason why you are approving it is because per the governing documents that enabled the TIF, all contracts need to come back before the Board of Aldermen at no matter what dollar amount. This one is just a tick over $22,000, though I don't think we will actually spend all that. Meena Gawali's scope of services is really just to help us get the first RFP off the ground, or RFQ technically, where we would be looking to bring forward the continuation of the Riverwalk, and hopefully have a civil engineering firm on board that would project manage, similar to the way Hayner Swanson did for the Broad Street Parkway with Mr. John Vancor. But that's the ultimate goal that we're working toward.
Discussion? Alderman O'Brien.
Thank you. Mr. Cummings, particularly of interest in one of the ancillary projects would be invasive species removal.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Could this contract, can she help us out maybe with some granting? I know the state does have some things, and we need to take care of that river. We don't want no more dirty water. You can keep it in Boston, but we want our Nashua to be good.
What was the song again?
You know, oh, I love that dirty
Oh,
water.
yes,
Yes. Mr. Cummings knows the tune.
I do. I know it
Knows
well.
from the general vicinity, yes.
And if I may, Mr. Mayor, the answer is yes. And in fact, Director Marchant and I already sat down with Ms. Gawali and started that conversation. As you know, the invasive species removal process is being really run out of the Community Development Office. And because that invasive species removal is so integral to the TIF and the success of the riverfront, Mina Gwali will be intimately involved and could help us by adding some additional resources such as grants and whatnot.
Very good. Mhm.
Other comments? All those in favor of the motion say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes. Alderwoman Kelly.
Communication from Dan Kukin, Purchasing Manager, regarding contract for legal counsel services for NMTC. Mr. Mayor, I move to accept, place on file, and award the contract to Drummond Woodsum Attorneys at Law in the amount of $56,500. Source of the funding is Department 183, Economic Development Performing Arts Center.
Mr. Cummings?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So the contract in its full amount is for $56,000, though it should be clear to everyone that our obligation is only somewhere around $5,000 as it's outlined in the contract, and that is for the pre-work that is necessary for setting up the differing legal entities, providing us with tax opinions relative to the new market tax credit transaction. This is just planning and preparation that we need to do so that we're in good stead. So if we are successful in receiving a new market tax credit, we will be able to execute quickly, and that's paramount in these types of transactions. So the balance of this fund, of this money, would actually come from the new market tax credit transaction itself. That $5,000-ish, and what's referenced in your memo, is a consulting line item that we have for the Performing Arts Center. So that money, $5,000, is not off of the authorized bond, but off of money that was set aside by the Downtown Improvement Committee for consulting services to advance the Performing Arts Center project. That's, the same funds that we use to pay for the professional fundraising consultant and the new market tax credit consultant. So anyway, I wanted to provide you that additional information and ask that you support this. It's extremely important that we get this outside legal services opinion or consultation to help us advance this project. And we've done this in collaboration with our Corporation Counsel's Office. Attorney Bolton has been working with me through this initiative. We requested 3 proposals from very experienced new market tax credit attorneys. And John Kaminsky of Woodman Drumson Woodwin is the one we're recommending.
Discussion? Alderwoman Harriet Gathright.
Question, Director Cummings, you said that the value is $56,500, but yet you think they're only gonna use about $5,000? Did I get that correct? But you also said there were 3 different attorneys?
So, yes, if I may, Mr. Mayor. So we solicited proposals from 3 different firms, and the one that we've chosen has outlined a 2-phase type contract, where the first phase, all we're obligating ourselves to is approximately $5,000, and that is all we're obligating ourselves to, because if we are not successful in obtaining that new market tax credit, which would pay for the balance of this contract, there's no expectation that we would have to pay the attorney.
Thank you.
Mr. Mayor?
Yes. Attorney Bolton.
Yeah, I want to make one disclosure so it's clear. Celia Leonard, the Deputy Corporation Counsel, is in fact married to a lawyer at this firm. That played no role in the selection of this firm. We excluded Celia from the selection of the firm. But Tim and I agreed that John Kaminsky had the best presentation of the lawyers we talked to. He understood what was involved and what we'd be facing, and he was very reasonable in structuring the contract, as Tim just explained, to minimize our expense and our exposure to expenses up front if we don't obtain the allocation of new market tax credits. So if the project doesn't go forward because those aren't obtained, the expense of these legal services will be minimized. Celia will be working on the project, but she was surprised as anyone when I told her that it would be her husband's firm. So, just to let you know.
Alderwoman Clee.
Mayor, Director Cummings, I just want to make sure that I do understand this correctly. You said a two-phase, 5,000, so the 5,000 will be paid out of what fund?
The consulting line item, the consulting budget, if you will, or the consulting account that the Downtown Improvement Committee approved, that is run through the Office of Economic Development.
Okay, so that 5,000 will be paid out of that, and the 51,000, if we did secure the credits and so on, will be paid out of the new market tax credit funds and so on. And I just want to make sure I have this correct. They are in fact going to help us secure these and new market tax credits, and this is different than the new market tax credit expert that we hired to help us do the application and so on. Those are two separate entities, correct?
Yes, Mr.
no?
Mayor, if I may, yes, two separate entities, and the legal counsel will play a supportive role
Okay.
to help us securing the new market tax credit. The bulk of that work would be done by the new market tax credit consultant that we already have on board.
Okay.
If you look at the scope of services, I think it's tasks like 1 through 3, if you will.
Right.
Is really what the new market tax credit attorney would be providing to us. Basically providing ancillary support, help us with marketing, help us with providing additional evidence to the new market tax credit entities, those CDEs, that we have our act together. This project is serious. We are working as hard as we can to bring it to fruition, and having this third-party type of attorney there to help echo that message is the type of services they would be providing, and that would be their role in that regard.
Thank you. I just wanted to make it clear for the listening public and so on. Thank you so much.
Alderwoman Kelly.
Thank you. Attorney Bolton, if we could just go back to what you brought up, I just wanted to be clear. You said Celia's going to work on it. Is her husband also working on it, or just the firm itself?
His expertise is in other areas.
Perfect. Thank you.
Mr. Cummings.
And I should also just note and echo on that point. This firm is a pretty large firm with multiple offices. This is not a type of firm where there's 1 or 2 type of practicing attorneys. I don't know how many attorneys they have, but there's quite a number of offices and quite a number of attorneys on staff at this firm, and they have a few different practice areas. And so this runs wholly separate from whatever attorneys Celia Leonard's husband works in.
Anyone else? All those in favor of the motion say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes. Alderwoman Kelly.
Communication from Dan Kuchen, Purchasing Manager, regarding fiscal agent agreement with City Arts Nashua. Mr. Mayor, I move to accept, place on file, and authorize the city to enter into fiscal agent agreement with City Arts Nashua.
Mr. Cummings?
Yes, thank you. So this document that's before you has been a long time coming. A document I would have liked to have gotten to you much sooner than now, but has been a very nuanced process. It is a representation of a lot of work where City Arts Nashua is coming forward and acting as our fiscal agent. And they have already been doing this informally on our behalf. So this just codifies and memorializes the process that has developed and what we've been working toward. It has been reviewed by the Performing Arts Center Steering Committee. It's been reviewed by a subgroup of that steering committee. It has been subject to a lot of conversations between the chair of City Arts Nashua, Lisa Bissonette, and myself. And there are terms in this agreement that I don't like, to be clear. And I found a little disappointing and frustrating, but I understand why they're there, and I respect the rationale and the reasons. At one point early on, I believe Alderwoman Gathright had asked a very specific question relative to is there going to be a fiscal agent fee? At that time, I had indicated no, because that's what I understood to be the case. Actually, right after that, I had learned that it was the intention of City Arts Nashua to charge us a 2% fee, or actually a little bit more than that. Correct, it originally started at 4%, and obviously that was a little disheartening to hear. I corrected the message with Alderwoman Gathright as soon as I learned about it, and then worked really hard to try to position ourselves to be in the best position possible. So what you have is 2% and capped at $40,000. And I think that's reasonable. We verified that with our professional fundraising consultant. I even got off the phone with her not an hour ago to reaffirm this, that she recommends it. She typically sees something in the order of 5% in these types of contracts. And she thinks that City Arts Nashua is providing value, and we should be willing to work with them, and they've done a great job thus far. So with that being said, Mr. Mayor, I'm asking you to endorse this contract.
Alderwoman Clee.
I was at a few of the meetings where we talked and discussed this, and it did start at 4%, and there were a number of experts there that told us it could go as high as 10%. We knew that would not happen. At least we prayed it would not happen with city arts. But the benefit of having them so close and so on, I think this 2% is a good plan. They will help promote the project and so on, which is also a benefit of it. And I think we would work really well with them. And I would echo the recommendation of approval of this.
Anyone else? Alderwoman Karen.
Thank you. So when I first saw the memo, it said value was 0, and then when I was reading the contract, it said up to $40,000. So, as I've said before, my concern is we're spending all this money in anticipating getting a lot of money, and now an agency that's come forward to act as our fiscal agency, which is all part of the Performing Arts Center, is going to get $40,000. And I'm still waiting to hear how much money do we have going towards the Performing Arts Center. That's my concern. And I know you can't do the work. Obviously, you can't be doing all of this. And, it's nice to have this. But I'm just wondering why we don't have a fund set up within the city, like we do a lot of projects, and there wouldn't be any cost because staff has to do all of this work. I just get a little nervous about this, and I know the mayor and I have talked about it. I'm not against I want this to happen. I want it to go right, and I just have all these fears. So if you can leave another one, that's
Well, in
that's
this,
fine, but
in this case, this is not city money that would be spent. This is contributions from individuals that go into a 501c3, which is the City Arts Nashua, and they hold the funds for the benefit of this project. So this is a 2% out of private funds that are contributed. I think I would add that, part of what we said is that we would keep the private funds that are raised out of the city's hands, that this wouldn't become a city project in that respect. So in order to do that, we have to use a 501c3, and this is the consequence of it. But the city money spent on this project would not be subject to this 2%.
Okay, okay, thank
This is
you.
only money that is contributed
Which we
in
don't
the form
know.
of a charitable contribution. I mean, I think we can say, well, Alderwoman Kelly,
You can finish, Mayor.
that, well, I know we can say that no city money would be spent in this fashion, because the city money is not subject to this.
Alright.
Yes, Alderwoman Kelly.
Okay, so couple of questions. First question is, if they were not intending to charge us a fiscal agent fee originally, does that mean what we currently have is not subject to this 2% fee?
It was never their intention to not charge us a fiscal agency fee.
So everything will be subject to this.
Correct.
Okay,
But capped at
capped at 40,000. Question around 40,000, does that then mean that we have to raise $4,040,000 before we can move anything?
So
Mr. Cummings.
you're not obligated to raise $4 million out of this particular entity. And in fact, I don't think you would actually raise $4 million out of this entity. And what has been told to this body on a couple of occasions is somewhere around 2 to 2.5 million is more realistic.
So the new market tax credit funds are if they are successfully obtained, do not flow through this. Those come directly to the city. The money that would go in here are people's money, people who write checks for the benefit of the Performing Arts Center. And the way that the resolution reads at this point is that as long as the city brings in $4 million, including new market tax credits, the project can proceed.
It's still
Alderwoman
$4
Kelly.
million. Oh, I'm sorry.
Okay, so then my question is, do we have a separate fund where those new markets tax credit are going to? Is it a trust fund? What's that?
That's a great question, and one that we're working on. Part of the reason why we're procuring this new market tax credit attorney to help us set up those types of structures, so we can actually do this and do exactly what you're talking about, which would be to set up another entity that would actually receive the funds and actually, if you will, manage the project.
The new market tax credit transaction is complicated. It needs, anybody who does that needs legal and consulting help. That is a separate issue from this. The money going to City Arts Nashua are the people who write private checks. So if you have written a check for the benefit of the Performing Arts Center, that money has gone to City Arts Nashua and is held in their 501c3 account. And that's what this has to do with.
Right.
So if we want tax deductibility for the contributors, we need a 501c3. The City Arts Nashua is providing that, and for that benefit, they are charging 2% to the people, really, to the people who make the contributions. But Alderwoman Kelly.
Yes, so we had originally talked about the fiscal agency as something that was a stopgap while we were setting up our 501c3. Can you talk about where we are in that process, please?
Yes, and that's again a great question. So, as quickly as possible, and we are working through these minor details, but they're minor, but they play a major role. They have material effects. So we need to make sure we're doing things appropriately. And so we would be looking to set up this separate 501c3 to take over for what City Arts Nashua is currently doing anytime now. Hopefully within the next few weeks, we can file that paperwork that would create the nonprofit. That nonprofit then would have to file for IRS tax exempt status, which could take anywhere around 6 months. And so what we want to make sure we do, though, is make sure we set up this structure that allows us to proceed in a way that doesn't prohibit the new market tax credit transaction. And if anything, can help complement it. And those are the type of more nuanced conversations that are occurring.
I have somebody to contribute on this.
Yes, Mr. Bolton.
I believe you'll all be seeing in the material you receive on Friday a resolution to adopt state enabling legislation that will allow for the creation of one or more five or nonprofit corporations by the city. And that's the next step in putting this in motion. So you'll be seeing that on Friday for introduction next Tuesday, and hopefully approval at the next Board of Aldermen meeting.
Excuse me, Alderwoman Kelly.
I just wanted to clarify one thing, and then I'm gonna give the floor. When I asked about the $40,000, it doesn't matter whether we're raising them through the tax credits or we're raising them privately. We still have to account for the fiscal agent's fee before we can move forward, correct? If we have $40,000 less than 200,
No,
than 4 million, then we can't move forward?
no, it's just an expense.
Okay.
We have to raise a certain amount of money. How we expend that is not controlled in that resolution.
Thank you.
Now, this agreement can be terminated with 60 days' notice if we don't like it. So I think, but I reiterate again, there is no city money that will go to City Arts as a result of this contract. No city tax funds. These are all privately raised funds. 2% would go to City Arts Nashua. So if you contribute $5,000, 100 of those dollars would go to City Arts Nashua for the service they're providing in enabling you to get a charitable tax deduction, and for holding the funds until the funds are needed. Alderwoman Karen.
Thank you. So this is a one-time, $40,000, no more than $40,000. Doesn't matter how long it takes. It's no more than $40,000 that City Arts will get.
Correct.
Okay, so.
And not one of those dollars will be a city tax dollar.
Okay, thank you. My next question is, are they holding that in a separate account for the Performing Arts Center? And I see a head shaking, so.
If I may, Mr. Mayor, yes. Yes, they are. Whole separate bank account.
So do you think someday we'll know what we have in that bank account?
Nice.
Someday.
Thank you.
Thank
you.
Yeah, if I may, I know the Capital Campaign Committee, which I am not part of, is working hard and as diligently as possible. And in fact, I believe they meet tomorrow morning.
Thank you.
But they cannot really begin in earnest until we have the design. So, I mean, that's getting close. Alderwoman Harriet Gathright.
I think please first.
No, that's okay.
All right.
Please, no. it's fine.
Okay,
She-
my question is the $40,000, so, it conceivably, they might not ever get to that $40,000, correct?
Correct.
Thank you.
Want them to, that's the
No, we
thing.
don't.
Yeah, well, you do, because you want that $4 million.
Well, once we establish a separate 501c3,
Oh,
money could go there and wouldn't go to the, so even private contributions would go to that entity and not to City Arts. So only with respect to money
What they
that
get.
goes to City Arts while they are performing 501c3 services go to them. So if the bulk of the money comes in through the other 501c3, they would get very little.
okay. Thank you for clarification.
Alderwoman Clee.
That was kind of what I was going to clarify also. But on the opposite end, if this does take a long time for us to get a 501c and suddenly somebody dropped an extraordinary amount of money, which probably won't ever happen, but if they did, we would not go over the 40,000. And that's kind of what this contract is. And
That's
and
correct.
So
If someone gave $10 million.
Right, we'd
the
still
fee
only
would be
pay 40.
40,000.
And if we've
Total.
already been, right, and if we've already been collecting up to that point, it would even be less on that $10 million. So
Correct.
that's the bottom line. But we do hope, once this gets approved and so on, how long do we know? I'd heard 6 months to a year it could take to get a 501c, depending upon the IRS's time and availability. Do we have any clue or idea as to what we think realistically?
So if I may, Mr. Mayor, I'm going to say that we are creating a structure that is going to be as clean and as putting ourselves in the best position possible so we achieve that designation as quickly as possible.
Good.
So I can't speak for what the timeline would be for the IRS, but we're doing it in a way so whatever that is, it's on the 6-month side of things, not the year side of things, which was part of the issues that we were working through relative to the new market tax credit.
But it may not happen
conversation.
until after the money needs to be gotten, so to speak. And we could possibly stay with City Arts until that
Correct.
February, March date. But thank you.
Anything else? Discussion? Brandon's really being quiet tonight. Or, excuse me, Alderman Laws is being quiet tonight.
A lot on my mind, sorry.
All right. All those in favor of the motion say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes. Next item, Alderwoman Kelly.
Communication from Tim Cummings, Economic Development Director, regarding notice of change in contract for residential brokerage services with Louise Brochu.
And is there a motion to accept this and place it on file?
So moved.
Discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes. Alderwoman Kelly.
Communication from Tim Cummings, Economic Development Director, regarding memorandum of agreement with Spectacle Management. I can move to accept the communication and place it on file, but I would like to point out that I did not see the MOA attached.
Yeah, I didn't see
with
it
the
either,
paperwork.
actually. Yes.
If I may, I have it in front of me because that's Resolution 18073,
yes,
which is
right.
later on in your agenda.
Yes, right.
I'll respect
Okay.
that.
All right, so all we need here is to accept and place on file, right?
Moved.
All those in favor of the motion say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes. Unfinished business, none. Resolutions, R19-129, authorizing the City of Nashua to enter into contracts with Nashua Community College, Riviera University, Town of Hudson, Town of Merrimack, Sauhegan Valley Transportation Collaborative, and the Plus Company for Transit Services. Alderwoman Kelly.
I move to recommend final passage.
Any discussion? All those in favor of the motion say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes. R19-132, and we have a guest here on this one. Authorizing the mayor to enter into a concession agreement with Granite Diamond LLC. So Mr. Creedon is here. Maybe you could come up and sit next to Alderwoman Karen. That would be great. Or here, right there is either way. Wherever, either way. So what this resolution does is it approves a transfer of the lease from the former owner of the Silver Knights to the new owner of the Silver Knights, which is the entity that's described, but in essence is Mr. Creedon's company. Mr. Creedon is already an operator, or his company, his family, are already an operator in the league. They own the not the Boston Red Sox. Unfortunately, they don't own the Red Sox. They do own the Worcester Bravehearts. And they've come to the city. They have shown a lot of imagination and energy down in Worcester, and they've come forward and put forth a very ambitious plan regarding growing the team and making it a successful entity. And we do still believe that the Silver Knights are going to beat the Bravehearts this year and probably every year. And we put a little bit of a wager on that with their general manager down in Worcester. But I think Mr. Creedon's going to do a great job for us, and will really move the team forward based upon the discussions and everything that Mr. Creedon has done already. But with that, I might introduce Mr. Creedon, and he could tell you a little bit about himself and what he intends for the team.
Sure. Good evening, and thank you for your time. As the mayor said, we're already in the baseball business. We've been operating a baseball team for 6 years down in Worcester, Massachusetts. My family business and background, we're actually a catering company and a tent rental company, so we come at the baseball business model from the hospitality perspective. So we're very excited about extending some warm and plentiful hospitality to all the guests for the Nashua Silver Knights games, and that would also extend beyond Nashua Silver Knights games to city events at the ballpark as well. So very excited at the opportunity, and I want to thank Mayor Donchis and your administration, the Parks and Rec Department. Everybody has been warmly welcome and gracious and very supportive of us operating the team. And the collaboration could not have been better up to this point, and I'm very excited for what the future holds, near term and long term. So thank you all.
And the terms of the lease are precisely the same. All we're doing is just substituting one entity for another in terms of the team with whom we have a relationship, or the owners of the team with whom we have a relationship. Alderwoman Kelly?
It's not a question, just a comment. I just wanted to say welcome.
Thank you.
Excited to have you. I know that I've been going to the baseball games since I moved to Nashua, and I think it's a treasure that we have here in the city. My daughter loves to go, so looking forward to seeing you.
I look forward to seeing you and your family. Thank you.
And they have a deal. If you offer the same thing as Worcester, if you pay $385 for the season, you can go to every game and eat as much as you want.
It's true.
As much as you want
Yeah. It's
for
a great bar.
$385, and for that's like 20.
Fiance.
It's what?
My fiance.
That's like
I wouldn't have said that in public.
Fiance? Wait till, yeah, wait till you get
She's not gonna be
home.
your fiance anymore. Wow.
Haven't met the board, never mind.
isn't it? It's 22 games, right?
It's
Isn't it
28 regular season home games
28
and then playoffs.
So you'd get 28, 30 meals for $385, as much as you want. So that's a pretty good deal.
I'm eating for two, so here we go.
There you go.
Alderwoman Harriet Gathright.
How do you spell your last name?
Creedon.
Thank you.
Anyone else? Alderwoman Karen.
Thank you. I want to welcome you too, because I think this is a great fit for Nashua. I was there when the first group came in 100 years ago and was part of that ball field for 40 years. So it's nice to see new faces there, and I'm sure you're going to bring some new and exciting things for not only the team, but the concession stand, we hope.
Yes.
And no, Mayor, I will not be giving $375.
$385.
Oh,
But
$385, I'm
I have
sorry.
talked to
No,
some-
seniors don't get a discount?
I've talked to some single people in our community who've said, hey, that's a good way to, take care of 28 nights of dinner during the summer.
Even better,
A
it's
date night?
350. 350.
Oh, it's $350? Oh, even,
For seniors, not for seniors.
Sure. Yep. Friends and family discount, sure.
Thank you.
any discussion?
I just wanted to add that.
Alderwoman Kelly.
That works out to $12.50 per meal.
I'll see you at every game.
All those in favor, sorry, Alderman O'Brien.
Just quickly, I just want to say welcome. I think this is great. I mean, it's one of the better assets to the city for the family fun, to come out on a nice night and enjoy a decent ball game, take concession advantages, nothing like a hot dog at Holman Stadium, They taste better there for sure, so I wish you the best of luck to your franchise.
Thank you very much.
Alderman Laws.
How do I follow that up, really?
Just don't.
Well, I don't want to be the only person not to welcome you into the community. I'm excited. I was going to ask you afterwards, but I'll just invite you now to Downtown Improvements Committee at some point. Hopefully, there's something we can do to work with you to get the local downtown businesses involved with the stadium. I remember just anecdotally, years ago, I'm a bartender, small business owner downtown. They used to have something called Stars and Bars, where they'd take all of the local bartenders and place them on teams against
Oh, nice.
people on the nights, and it was a great time, packed stadium.
I think that's a good idea.
Yeah.
So he could, Alderman Laws could pitch.
You saw
And,
last year.
uh, It'd be great. Alderwoman Karen.
So, Mayor, if I remember, the last time you were mayor, we had a ball team playing out there. It was the Board of Aldermen against all these various employees and department heads
Well, maybe we
at
should do
home
that
in
again.
stadium, and that turned into the community or health department chief, Dolly Bellavance,
Maybe
was
we
part
should-
of that crew.
Maybe we should try that again.
Don't ask me.
I'm watching too, Linda.
Alderwoman Clee.
That in my hand is a lethal weapon. We don't want that. And I was going to add that I still have the video of Alderman.
Come on, man.
Alderman Laws throwing out that first pitch. Anybody wants to see it, I have it on the phone, so.
Bad.
How short?
It was a great honor, Mayor. Thank you for extending me that courtesy. I appreciate it.
Any other discussion?
You don't know
All
what
those
you
in
got
favor of the
into.
motion say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, and the resolution is recommended for final passage. And this will be voted on by the Board of Aldermen Tuesday.
Thank you. Thank you all.
You.
Thank you for coming. R19-133, authorizing the mayor to enter into a memorandum of understanding with Spectacle Management, Inc.
I move to recommend final passage.
You've heard the motion. Any discussion? All those in favor of the motion say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, and the resolution is recommended for final passage. Thank you, Mr. Cummings. New business ordinances, we have none. Record of expenditures. Alderwoman Kelly.
I've moved that the Finance Committee has complied with the city charter and ordinances pertaining to the record of expenditures for the period of March 30th, 2019 to April 11th, 2019.
Discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Say aye. Opposed, motion passes. General discussion, are there any general discussion items? What? Alderman Laws.
Thank you, Mayor. I just wanted to point out, I was a little flustered at the beginning of the meeting because I saw a presentation on the agenda and I was expecting the screen to come down. And then he started referencing page numbers, and I felt like I was back in college. So just in the future, fortunately, Alderman Clee showed me the light, but in the future, when there's a presentation like that and there's a pamphlet of material that we should be following along with.
We did get it. It was,
Where was it?
it was in the email.
The finance report?
We
That
got the
came, that
report.
Well,
came
my
2
mistake then.
weeks ago, yeah.
Yeah, but I think the email said something to the effect that we should bring it with you. I just didn't read the email till I got here.
And-
That was it.
Any other general discussion? Alderwoman Clee.
It's actually, I meant to mention it at the Pennachuck Water meeting that I was at, but the flushing of the hydrants has started, and people are calling about the brown water or making comments to it on the civic sounding board. And I just wanted to remind everybody, the process is to, for about 10, 15, 20 minutes, run your cold water, only your cold water. don't use a faucet that has a filter on it like your sink or something, but multiple faucets. This will clear it up. It's just through the flushing process. We do not have a brown water issue. And everybody that had this problem, when I gave them that advice, got clear water. If it doesn't clear up, Penachuk has asked that people contact them at 603-882-5191. I've been giving this number out. I have it memorized. They will come, they will flush out anything that needs to be done, but the 20 minutes has fixed it for everybody, so, thank you.
Keith, number.
603-882-5191.
Alderman O'Brien.
Yeah, and just to submit, the reason you were 100% correct, reason you want to run the code only, you don't want it in your hot water tank. So that's why you never turn on the hot tap. Just flush it out with the code and we'll be adequate. Very good.
Any other general discussion? Public comments? There are no members of the public here. Remarks by Alderman. Any remarks by Alderman? Alderman O'Brien.
Motion to adjourn.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
And the Finance Committee meeting is adjourned at 8:16.